Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Bill Angel's back with us today from OSU Lima. We're looking back, very timely that you're in. Yesterday was the Senate runoff between Walker and Warnock, and it looks like, I think, as you predicted, it turned out pretty much like you thought, huh?
I pretty much thought so, because one of the things that caught my eye was that Walker took a break just before Thanksgiving. He wasn't doing any kind of events for 5 days prior to Thanksgiving. So, I think he himself kind of knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. What does it mean for the balance of power? Because with Kamala Harris's vote, the Democrats already have the Senate, but if you can pad that lead, I'm sure that's beneficial.
Well, this is very important because, well, for one thing, it gives them majority control of each and every committee.
Okay.
And that includes the judiciary committees, where you can get judicial appointments through a lot more quickly than you could have otherwise with a 50-50 split. The other thing is that Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who have been kind of had exerted power in recent weeks, the last couple of years, will have less power than they had to upset things and upset legislation that the Biden administration wants to see passed.
If you're Democrats, do you feel this gives you momentum going into presidential elections in a couple of years?
I would say it does.
Yeah.
I would say it does. And of course, it also removes the question, raises the question again, is should Joe Biden run or not?
Right.
And it seems like he's got momentum, and who's going to step in for him? I mean, who knows?
Well, that's a good question, because he seemed like, even leading up to the Georgia runoff, that he's kind of him-hawing, I'll let you know at the beginning of the year. And then all of a sudden, when this started coming around and things looked a little better after the midterms, he thought, you know what, I might do this.
Yeah. He's got the wind at his back. So, I mean, I think he's likely to run for another term.
Who else would there be if, I mean, as you said, the Democrats haven't exactly groomed somebody to...
No, they haven't.
Yeah.
And they've become very weak at the state level. I mean, look at all the states that have flipped Republican in recent years. They don't have a lot of bench strength, that's what I would say. Yeah,
bench strength. That's good. A good baseball analogy. Now, you were talking about New York because the Republicans have control of the House. The Democrats had a bit of a mess up in New York.
Yeah,
right?
they did. They sort of took their lot of seats in the suburban areas east of New York City and around toward the New Jersey area. And they just took those seats for granted, and they lost them quite substantially in some cases, and the governor's race turned out to be a lot tighter than everybody expected. So there was a really sort of overconfidence, I guess hubris you would call it, among New York Democrats, thinking that they could easily kind of walk through and win as they usually did, but it didn't happen, and that probably cost Democrats control of the House.
Do you kind of throw out the political playbook now, because there have been so many polls about what would happen that turned out to be wrong? There were certain sections of the country that tended to sway GOP or Democrat. Some of those got flipped a little bit. It's kind of hard to guess what's going to happen next.
I think it's very hard because, of course, the districts keep changing, and the demographics keep changing. And when we talked last summer about the Hispanic vote, Hispanic vote's been kind of up and down in terms of where its allegiance goes. So I think voters themselves have become a little bit more, I guess, independent in terms of whether they're going to vote D or R, and you get a lot of people who are now on both sides.
Some Republicans are in a tough position. We've talked about this before, because I think they're trying to wait and see if Trump will still be the leader of the party, or somebody else, a DeSantis or somebody else emerges. Are they just in a wait and see pattern right now, most of them?
I don't think there's any wait and see. I think in terms of, look at the candidates that he backed, they universally failed. And almost universally failed. And so, I mean, people are starting to think, do we really want this guy to be the leader of the party? And his latest screw up with suspending the Constitution.
The Constitution was not good.
And then denying he ever said it makes him look really not a very good prospect for a 2024 presidential candidacy.
Yeah, if you're DeSantis, and DeSantis hasn't said a lot, which is maybe a smart political move on his part. He doesn't say much about Trump. Is he just doing his thing, obviously knowing he's going to be a contender for...
Well, you got DeSantis, but you also got Brian Kemp. I mean, you don't want to forget about him. I mean, he tried to pull Herschel Walker's along, but it didn't take. His votes didn't translate to Walker. But he did. He was a good soldier and worked for his candidate, and that's going to could possibly make him as a possible alternative to DeSantis. Yeah. DeSantis is a little too slick in some people's eyes, and a little too flip. And maybe somebody a little more down to earth like Kemp might be a good bet, especially if you want to talk about winning the South, winning Georgia, places like that. Kemp might be a good alternative to DeSantis.
It makes for fun political theater, that's for sure. All right,
Sure.
thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good seeing you. Dogo Medical News coming up next on Noon Edition.